All right, 10 years. 10 mother bleeping years. And it feels like 40 in my mind, maybe to some of you as well. In 2012, when I first started writing about Bitcoin, I had no idea that it would take me so far. I had just been sort of experimenting with the Silk Road. And like, I had no idea that it would bring me here to this stage. I can since it's 2019, so that's really great. I'm Bailey Reitzel. I'm the multimedia editor at CoinDesk. The video that you saw behind us, that was a project called Bitcoin at 10. It's a digital time capsule of untold stories of Bitcoin's history. One of the things as I was researching that project, everybody said as soon as they heard about Bitcoin, they went way, way down the rabbit hole. It's something everybody says. So here to talk with me today about that rabbit hole, or maybe you prefer to call it the red pill, is Patrick Byrne. He is the founder and CEO of Overstock.com. Overstock.com, one of the first retailers that started accepting Bitcoin as payment, an early adopter of cryptocurrency yourself. And his company, Overstock.com, and its various subsidiaries have been utilizing the broader blockchain technology in some very innovative ways. So thank you for being here. To my left, I have Adam Back. You probably all know Adam Back. He is the creator of Hashcash, which was specifically cited in the Bitcoin white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto. He is now the founder and CEO of Blockstream. So thank you for joining me. I wanted to start out really simple question about that rabbit hole. So Patrick, we'll start with you. How did you first hear about Bitcoin, and what were like your initial thoughts?
First heard about it reading just a little blurb in a Fast Company or a Wired magazine, and it mentioned the Byzantine generals problem. Something about money, and cryptography, Byzantine generals problem. At Stanford, I had done a master's in mathematical logic in computation theory, and 30 years earlier had studied the Byzantine generals problem, and it was that connection that got me intrigued and started paying attention.
So just initially you were intrigued by it? There
just from the cryptographic aspect.
Okay, all right, interesting. Adam, what about you?
Well, so I've been involved in trying to build and design previous electronic cash systems and write libraries for them. The first time I heard about Bitcoin was receiving an email from a fellow called Satoshi Nakamoto in August 2008. It didn't occur to me at the time that this person was a pseudonym, and it's common if you have sort of open source software packages or technical reports or papers online that people will occasionally send you an email and ask you about them or something like that. So it was another one of those kind of engagements and email discussions that followed from that. So but the Bitcoin rabbit hole phenomena does feel quite similar to some of the earlier periods where DigiCash, which is using some cryptography from David Chaum and from Stefan Brands, who's a friend of mine, is a cryptographer, designed a previous generation electronic cash systems. So my first thought about Bitcoin was actually that it was great that somebody had solved one of the remaining unsolved issues in our previous attempts involving Hashcash and BitGold and Wayday's. So Nick Szabo's BitGold and Wayday's B-Money, which all suffered problems from sort of how to figure out supply and inflation, basically.
Right. So you've been working on the technology for quite a while. There does seem to be a narrative in the space that Bitcoin should remain the way it was when Satoshi first published the white paper. I don't necessarily think that's happened, but it does seem to be a narrative. So I'm wondering, what do you think about that idea of stability and then the evolution of the protocol? You know, what's changed, what hasn't changed?
Well, I do think there's an expectation if you buy a financial instrument or if you buy a commodity that you should get what you paid for. So I can certainly understand as an investor that you don't want somebody to change the prospectus underneath it or change its kind of fundamentals. And Bitcoin's more like a digital commodity or something in that regard. But I think you have to bear in mind if you dive a few more levels down into the rabbit hole that the technology is imperfect and improving, and it's when you hit areas where there are trade-offs, and many people are excited about Bitcoin for different types of use cases, and sometimes the trade-off could be tuned in either direction, so that's where you run into problems. So I think that's why kind of multiple layers like layer 2 are quite interesting because they allow different use cases to be optimized without trading off against each other. So really finding a trick technology approach that allows different use cases to be optimized without impacting other use cases.
Fair enough, yeah. And Patrick, as one of the people who's been here for a long time, who's been in the space for a long time, you know, Bitcoin at that time was being adopted by merchants, being used maybe more as a payment system than it is today. Do you feel like that payment use case is sort of dying off, or do you feel like maybe it's just starting with sort of the Lightning Network stuff that you see going on?
I don't think it's dying off. It was not robust or quick enough to really support a global payment system to begin with. Maybe now it is. I don't think it's dying off. I think that what my sense is what drives people towards it historically has been where there have been real financial crises. We've seen this happen in different countries, and that's where people adopt Bitcoin. I think that there will be, I do expect some kind of financial event here in the years ahead. I don't quite understand how we've gotten as far as we have, like as deep a hole as we have in our financial system. And when that breaks, I expect that will really be the big driver of true mass adoption. Right now, 0.2% of our sales are in Bitcoin, and that's very stable.
How has that changed from, you know, maybe the hype of like 2013 to now?
It's totally stable. Totally
really?
stable.
Okay.
From the time we started, it's been 0.15, 0.2%. Never gets above that.
Okay.
So it did not become a PayPal. It is not in people's mind a way to go about paying their bills. But we are trying to do what we can. I was recently researching, I'm going to incentivize people at the end of this year, if all goes well, by saying, okay, when it comes to those people who receive a bonus at the end of this year, you can either receive X in fiat dollars, or you can receive 105% of X in Bitcoin, and thus start trying to drive some more people to adopt it, and maybe even do the same thing with some vendors, some suppliers, give them economic incentives to adopt Bitcoin if we can figure out a good way.
Gotcha. So as sort of those narratives have shifted over time, do you, Adam, see a difference in how newcomers, adopters, end up thinking about the technology from, you know, its start in 2009 to now? How has that changed?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, people find their entry point into Bitcoin through different routes, and however, the technology is not neutral, so people quickly come to appreciate the unique power of having censorship-resistant money that's permissionless, and you can just, you know, get a smartphone application and receive it and start spending it with a certain degree of privacy and unseizability, unfreezability. So I think, you know, people might start from a kind of novelty item or a merchant from a way to introduce people to Bitcoin. But when they get further into it, they start to appreciate the other values of it. So, you know, if you look at the different use cases for Bitcoin, I think the most sticky ones are the ones where there isn't really any competition from established financial alternative payment mechanisms. And there are certainly ones that have that characteristic, and even where it will be difficult for financial institutions to follow, to catch up. And those tend to be sort of emerging markets where many people don't have bank accounts, or where the currencies are unstable, where there's hyperinflation, the economy is weak, or the infrastructure is poor, and or there are capital controls. And you see, I think, higher Bitcoin adoption within gray markets or communities who are discriminated against or not within the mainstream, because you see in some developed countries the phenomena where perfectly legal activities that are frowned upon by specific personalities within the establishment are unable to obtain stable banking service or lose their bank services. Yeah. And so Bitcoin provides, you know, for those kind of use cases, so in enabling people to transact beyond these restrictions. And I think, you know, in the grand scheme of things, that has a potential to be significant in a geopolitical sense, because if you cast your eye back, you know, a few decades even to when the internet was first gaining mass adoption, it wasn't that, you know, it wasn't clear at the time, but it really changed the balance of power for publishing and social media and the ability for people to organize. and is credited with being a factor in overthrow of oppressive regimes. So if you scroll forward a couple of decades with a permissionless global hard money, I think that could easily have a similarly large geopolitical effect. And that's pretty interesting from my perspective in enabling people to take control and seize rights that they have under regulations, but they see eroded de facto by the kind of very centrally logged and recorded online world as sort of the revelations of Snowden showed that things were actually being recorded in a way that even within the US and other major countries, even the judicial system agree was illegal activity on a part of one niche of the establishment.
Right. Yeah, so I was just on the punk rock crypto panel as well, so we were talking about this. So it's like Venezuela, Spank Chain, with the adult entertainers. Do you guys have any other examples of sort of those gray areas or these markets where it's really unstable?
Well, I mean, the way to think about it, I think, is firstly, I would say that a good use for Bitcoin, somebody shouldn't be talking about because, it's a gray market. So you won't find like glowing testimonials of, this person used Bitcoin to evade this or buy that, because it's really able to do, you can be used for all kinds of transactions, even for just convenience or cost or speed for international transfers, right? Because international wire transfers are expensive and slow and error prone, for example. But certainly one kind of test is, well, if Bitcoin has an extremely high uptime and because it's distributed, but as a thought experiment, if Bitcoin was down today and you're about to do a Bitcoin transaction, would you stop and wait for tomorrow, or would you just reach for some other form of payment and make it?
Oh, yeah,
so one way you would not make the payment either because you can't or you'd really prefer not to is, to my mind, a more sticky, like fundamental to Bitcoin value. And further, if that payment niche that makes you not want to make the payment is not fulfillable by banks because of regulatory things or cost structures or the need to onboard, the cost of onboarding users and that kind of thing, then that's an area where you can see that Bitcoin has a very long and sticky permanent future in that use case.
Yeah, fair enough. What about you, Patrick? Do you see any use cases that are sort of these gray markets or unstable markets?
Boy, I happened to have popped by Venezuela last year to meet the Bitcoin community.
Oh, yeah?
And they thought they were going to save their country. They thought that they had the chance to save their country. It was the fellows, very smart young men, who had developed, what's the name of that website? It's used all over the world. Like if you're in Zimbabwe and you need a guy to come to your door, you got to stack a local currency, and it's got, I forget the name of the site, but you enter where you are, and somebody comes to your door, and you can do a cash transaction anywhere in the world.
For crypto?
Yeah, for
like local Bitcoins?
local bit. I think they're the inventors of local Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Are in Venezuela. Cool guys. They're hoping. Well, they were hoping at the time that this could. They saw the possibility of this playing some role in saving. I mean, they literally is a country starving to death. So there is an alternative system there where the financial system, the above ground financial system, just isn't even functioning. Right. The police and military are just protecting the government installations. So that's where, I think it's situations like that that drive, and that may actually make a case for Bitcoin. Besides, we have been stigmatized a bit, and of course the mainstream media did everything they could to stigmatize us in the last decade with the Silk Roads, the Mt. Goxes. So maybe a couple winning cases like that will serve the mission.
All right, fair enough. So back to some fun stuff maybe. What are 2 adjectives that you would use to describe Bitcoin?
Rebellious, and disruptive.
Okay, what about you, Adam?
Uncensorable and permissionless.
Okay, I like those. Those are good. Who is the strangest person you've ever talked to about Bitcoin? Adam, we'll start with you.
Strangest person?
Yeah.
Huh. I don't know. I don't really try to form judgments about people. Like, fairly relaxed about talking to people from all manner of backgrounds. And it's pretty interesting. Actually, I interacted with somebody pretty early on at a conference. I think it was in Vegas. And he said that like basically Bitcoin saved his life or like transformed his life. And it was a kind of interesting story. So, you know, his mother had died and he had no money and he was living on a friend's couch and he was like browsing the internet and he came across Bitcoin. And I guess it was like 2010 or something. So he bought, like he took the small amount of money he had and bought Bitcoin. And, you know, there's massive price appreciation. And today he's operating like Bitcoin related sort of data hosting. He was like an IT kind of guy.
Okay.
So it was a very positive story, but it was kind of like out of the blue. This guy came up to me and like wanted to say hello to somebody who had a part in the Bitcoin technology and told me this pretty inspiring story.
Yeah, totally. Patrick, what about you? Who's strangest or loveliest person you've ever talked to about Bitcoin?
Well, loveliest would be easy. It would be the lovely Bitcoin girl that we just saw. But it would be either Roger Ver or Bruce Fenton, both whom I adore, but both who are strange cats.
Fair enough. Yeah, we saw Roger on stage. It was really fun to like get him to do a mean tweet segment, actually. So yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about you guys' company specifically. Patrick, what's coming next in sort of like crypto blockchain innovation for Overstock or any of your subsidiaries?
Well, we've just announced our Medici land governance program, which did 50,000 homes last year in Zambia. Just got a contract to do a minimum 250,000 additional homes, could be a couple million. And so that project in Africa is really taking off, and that I'm thrilled about that.
Fair enough. What about you, Adam? I know you just launched Green Wallet. Green Wallet? Is that what it is?
Well, yeah, so we added liquid asset support to the Green Wallet platform. So, I mean, generally speaking, Blockstream is a Bitcoin infrastructure company. So we do a range of things. Over the weekend, we announced at the Magical Crypto Conference the integration of GoTennor's mesh networking into the Bitcoin satellite full node. So we have leased bandwidth on 4 satellites globally, and we're broadcasting Bitcoin transactions. This has been running for over a year now. So Bitcoin transactions are blocks from space to most of the world's population. And on the receiving end, you need about $100 of equipment, including a full node. And so that's receive-only technology. So then the question is, and the general idea with a satellite is to provide a backbone and see that people in emerging markets can build up infrastructure around it, like mesh networks and kiosks and ways to pay in a marketplace. So we worked with a GoTenor company that makes portable mesh networking equipment to integrate mesh networking into the node so that people can send transactions in a local area. And the mesh network hops are between 1 and 3 miles, so you can cover quite a bit of area with a network of this type of equipment. So that's kind of something we did recently on kind of Bitcoin use case related and deployment and adoption. And then we also have Liquid, which is more for assets. So it's the first and fastest to adopt are obviously Bitcoin exchanges because they're already in this business, but increasingly more types of assets coming into this kind of Bitcoin layer 2 technology, which provides more confidentiality and faster transactions and more secure transactions where you can do atomic trades in the network. So you can basically send signed limit orders to an exchange, and then they don't have a hot wallet at risk, basically. So we're developing lots of different types of infrastructure. Obviously, we work with many companies because it's infrastructure and people are integrating it into their back offices, into their applications, or into their payment use cases.
Yeah, so Lightning is really hot right now. People love the Lightning network. I just wanted to get you guys' take on Lightning. Do you think it is gonna, there's that narrative that it's gonna make Bitcoin like a payment mechanism again. Yeah, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so it's able to do, I mean, it's again what I was saying about being able to avoid some unfortunate trade-offs where people are competing for the same space if you optimize different use cases differently, and that's common in other networks. So Lightning, you can think of Lightning as just new capabilities and new scalability for Bitcoin. When you hold a Bitcoin in Lightning, it's still a Bitcoin, and you can transact with people without Lightning. So somebody with Lightning can send to somebody without Lightning and vice versa. And then people who are both in Lightning can send to each other faster and cheaper. So that's the shape of it. So Blockstream is actually one of the developers of the Lightning protocol. There are 3 main implementations, and they're all cooperating and collaborating on an open specification. So I think it has a lot of potential, and particularly some of the features coming in the next version help with this kind of backwards and forwards compatibility. So I think that will simplify the user interface for wallets that use it, so that you'll just see one balance and it can be sent to somebody who doesn't have Lightning, who has Bitcoin only, and vice versa. Somebody with Bitcoin only can increase your Lightning balance. So that really just ends up looking like Bitcoin, but with new capabilities.
Yeah, fair enough. Have you used the Lightning Network? Have you been #reckless?
I have not, but I know colleagues of mine from work do, and they would agree. I would not challenge Adam on anything he just said.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So, we're getting down to the final minutes, but I wanted, using the last 10 years as a guide, what do you predict for the next decade? And it could be in tech, it could be in business. Everybody loves price predictions, so if you want to throw any of those out, that's also fine. Patrick, we'll start with you.
No price prediction. I feel like the last 10 years have really been taking the technology from infancy to something commercializable. And I mean, that's an oversight. There's been commercial products so far, but not, I'd say, enterprise grade, enterprise class. And we're now at that point where there's feels to me like this year is where products, big world-class products are coming out of people's pipelines.
Yeah, I think it feels like we've been saying that for a couple years, but it might be this year.
Well, I know it's happening with Medici this year. I know these guys are introducing some things in weeks.
Fair enough. Well, so I think sort of the enterprise blockchain stuff, it becomes sort of contentious with the crypto community. There's like crypto community and there's like blockchain community. And you do I think Overstock and Medici and those people, you do a little bit of both. So I guess, how do you deal with that contention between those two parties?
Well, we're not ideological about it. We are trying to build things that, we're trying to build a blockchain version of a central bank. And we signed something a month ago, it was announced, with the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. And we are building the blockchain version, and everybody in the Eastern Caribbean will download a free app. And now, I've been, a friend of mine who's more hardcore is basically saying, you're telling me you're doing a deal with the devil. You're creating a blockchain central bank. I thought we're against central banking. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not, we got to get the camel's nose under the tent. We got to get this blockchain stuff. I think that it will gradually force the withering away of the state, maybe not in the way that Marx envisioned, but in a different way will be supplanted. But to be a real purist about it and saying that you can't be doing a blockchain central bank because we're against central bankers would be an example to me of being too ideological. And I welcome bringing blockchain into sort of making the compromises you need to make to get it to become part of the fabric of our world.
Yeah, fair enough. So Adam, what are your predictions for the next couple years?
So I think, you talked about price briefly, that the sort of sideways market movement in 2018 gave breathing room in terms of less distraction factor for a lot of technology to be developed. And I think a lot of that technology has been developed and is converging and coming together. So I think that there will be more maturing of layering and more mass adoptable technology. I think more usability work is needed as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. I can definitely say that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at very early internet applications, there were periods where a video was a kind of very grainy thing, and it was hard to envisage what would happen. But nowadays we do high definition real-time video chats with just random strangers on the internet. So it's a whole different world, and so it's a little bit hard to predict what everybody will use Bitcoin for once it reaches full adoption. But it does seem that there will be interesting uses that people will put it to, and that it will reform many dysfunctional financial situations and economic situations in different countries by introducing a kind of, so there's a saying that in past centuries there was a separation of religion from state so that people had more freedom to choose religion, and Bitcoin has been about separating money from state so that the central bank is not involved. It's a hard free market money, and it's permissionless and censorship resistant. So it'll be very interesting to see what that brings to the world. And I mean, again, about price, I have said in the past that in the longer term, so like 10 years, 5 to 10 years will be the longer term, it seems that to me, we talked about the payment use case, and then you can ask, well, what drives the price of Bitcoin? And I think the price of Bitcoin is basically people buying into the promise of what the ability to make these kind of payments, what that's worth as a payment network or as a way to store and retain wealth in a censorship-resistant way with maybe more asset protection. And so it's a sort of competitor in a way to gold, which tends to react counter-cyclically to geopolitical uncertainty and things like that. So I could see that Bitcoin could hold a value of 250 to 500,000 a coin if you look at the comparables with gold price and divide it by the number of users and the number of coins and so forth.
Yeah. What's full adoption in your mind? Like, what's the ultimate goal here?
Well, I mean, there are people who think even loftier things of the reintroduction of the gold standard using digital gold, which is Safedine Amouse's book, and it's certainly a very interesting beyond 10 years thing that may happen. And I think that Bitcoin has been a bit of a blur for people down the rabbit hole because things are moving much faster in Bitcoin. So it seems like the time passed very quickly, actually. But at the same time, I would say there have been major developments and shifts that people didn't see happening for 5 years that happened in 1 year. And like lots of these kind of things happened. When my company started in 2014, we weren't sure if banks would be interested in Bitcoin, and within a year or two, every major bank had a blockchain or R&D lab, basically. Yeah. So it's certainly moving very fast, and effectively, the Bitcoin price is just a way for people to express what they think about the future potential. But in terms of its potential, it really comes down to the use case. If you look at those use cases where there are economic conditions that benefit from it, or payments that can be more efficient or beneficial without the friction of policies and third parties in between, then people have a use for that, will use it. So that may not create a use for regular payments in developed countries, but it certainly has a lot of use internationally and for people who suffer non-uniform access to those kind of services, even in developed countries.
Right. So what do you think sort of about the blockchain and cryptocurrency split? I mean, a lot of the times, I will say that blockchain is just really hard to define. Everybody has sort of their own definition. And so it's really hard to tell what blockchain is. So how do you feel about that split and this idea that like a lot of things are blockchain?
Well, I view it a bit like the distinction of intranets versus internet. So in the early internet days, because the internet looked new and a scary Wild West kind of place, public market companies tended to not connect to it and like set up their own private intranets because they were kind of scared of the web. But eventually they realized that there's benefit to open interconnected networks innovate faster and deliver more value, and the interconnectedness brings a kind of multiplicative value. So I think about it in a similar way, and also I think it's difficult to take the mining and the incentive out of the security model. So I think ultimately if there's a blockchain with no economic incentive, you've essentially kind of made a sort of federated database or distributed database, which already exists in a sense, right? Yeah. So I think that the fact that there is an economic incentive to secure the network and that the participants have a skin in it in the game and their actions help secure the network is a benefit. So, at Blockstream we have a foot like Patrick in both camps because we're developing Bitcoin technology and then we're developing layer 2 technology for trading. So for representing different kinds of assets, regulated and unregulated, in this format. And I think that has a lot of value to deliver to all kinds of use cases because people who are not involved in the kind of back office IT technology behind stock markets don't realize necessarily how many intermediaries are involved and how many failure scenarios can happen. Right. So particularly the Bitcoin type of blockchain, which is very final cash-like settlement, simplifies things because there's no room for naked selling and so forth. Yeah.
So last question, I know this is Bitcoin at 10, but is there another coin that you would like to see make it to 10 years? There's plenty that have, but yeah, is there a coin that you definitely want to see make it to 10 years? Adam, we'll start with you.
I mean, I think there are features in some coins that could be usefully added to Bitcoin, but I tend to view money as a winner takes all because of the network effect value.
All right, Patrick.
Ravencoin, I hear, is pretty special.
Okay, all right, yeah, definitely. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. That is all our time, so please give them a round of applause. Thank you very much.